for those of you that don't know what the McKnight Photography Fellowship is, it's a mid-career artist award where we give $25,000 annually to 4 different photographers that are residents of the state of Minnesota. It's something we do every year. I think it's something really unique to Minnesota that we're able to award a significant amount of money and also this honor to photographers that have stayed working here and are at a mid-career status. And what they're able to do with that is a variety of things. There's really no restriction, but most of the photographers use it to pay off debt or continue the work that they're doing or travel or finish projects that they're currently working on, much of which we're going to see tonight as they show their work. I think I'd also like to announce that we're always in the middle of a different cycle. So next year's cycle's already begun, and we already have awarded next year's fellows, and that is Colleen Mullins, James Henkel, Peter Happel-Christian, and Beth Dow. And their exhibition will be opening a little bit later next year. It's going to be in September at the Rochester Arts Center. We're going to do this one outside the Twin Cities, which will be, I think, a really unique opportunity to do something there. And also the show's going to be up for about 3 months. So that gives everybody plenty of time and no excuses to travel down to Rochester. So look forward to that next year. All right, on with the show. The last thing I would like to do is do a few thanks. This wouldn't be possible without a lot of different people, in particular the McKnight Foundation for all of their support, particularly Laura Zimmerman and Sarah Lovin for their help with the program. I also would like to thank, and hopefully Jira's in here, so the program, there you are. Jira's helping with a lot of the programs that are happening outside and missed last week at the beginning, so I'm glad that she's in here tonight. Jira, really, I couldn't do this program without Jira's help. She's the program coordinator for the fellowship and helps in every aspect of it, from helping to build the website that people apply to coordinating every aspect of the program. So thank you, Jira. And also thanks to both Franklin Artworks, Tim and Colleen, and to Midway Contemporary, everybody over there, John, Megan, Aaron, Kelsey, the whole crew. And I really appreciate all of your support throughout the year. Okay, I'm done, so on to artists. Our first artist is Amy Eckert, who is, until a few weeks ago, based in Minneapolis. Amy actually left like right after the opening to have to move to LA. Not have to, but chose to move to LA. A little bit of both. Amy recently relocated to LA, and she received a BFA from the Massachusetts College of Art and Design, the other MCAT, in 1993, and an MFA from Bard College in 2002. Amy's recent work repurposes and manipulates pre-existing photographic material from her personal archive into an entirely new body of work, collage work. These new series juxtapose abstracted forms with familiar textures, topographies, and photographic conventions, resulting in moments of connection and dislocation for the viewer. Please welcome Amy Eckert.
Thank you, Scott. I want to thank Scott and Jara and the staff at Midway and the McKnight Foundation. I also especially want to thank the jurors who supported me, and they supported my assertion that the time in between big definable projects is really just as important as the time doing the projects. And so I think it's really important to emphasize that time for exploration and growth is really important to all artists. And so that is how I spent my McKnight year. I got this fellowship just as I was finishing up with a very long project that I worked on for about 10 years, and that's called Manufacturing Home. I'm going to show a few pictures from this project because it's really the launching pad for everything I worked on this year. And it also embodies the themes that I just seem to always circle back to in my work, and those are ideas about mobility versus stability, the question of what is home, and what does that mean to me, and also what does it mean to the billion-dollar housing industry that's selling this concept back to us. So, by way of a little background, I grew up in mobile homes, different periods in my life, so I had a lot of personal experience to draw on. So these are some shots from our house trailer in South Carolina. We actually drove this trailer from upstate New York to South Carolina and back again in like the early 70s. So this would be 1972 to 73. My dad remembers seeing our house drive by us on the highway, which is just, to me, a fascinating and bizarre memory to have. Excuse me. So in this project, Manufacturing Home, I photographed brand-new mobile homes that were never lived in. They're for sale. They're just weird spaces, and I was attracted to this kind of odd architecture and this hybrid house vehicle. And one of the other things that interested me was the fact that they have wheels underneath. So that's kind of this fundamental lack of a commitment to a particular place. And I wanted to capture this sense of things not being quite right, either structurally or emotionally or in a narrative sense. Wasn't really a documentary project, strictly. I moved stuff around. Some of the objects and furniture, I would rearrange things sometimes. I posed people. I directed them. And keep your eye out for that bedspread. It'll show up later. So I used this fellowship opportunity to really play and explore ideas that grew out of this project, and to pick up some tangents that had been sidelined because I worked on this for so long. So there's a couple main threads to talk about. The first is a collage series called, what's it called? Misunderstood Buildings. So back up to 2007, 2008, I got really fascinated by the promotional materials that I'd collected from these manufacturing companies, and I started making collages out of them, just sort of as a side project. And I eventually hit on this format where I would take out their picture from their promotional picture, which is usually a terrible photograph, and then I would insert something of my own in there. And it was really this question of, well, what can a house really be? It's called Sync. And about the same time, I got interested in this idea of an architectural folly. It's a building with an identity crisis. You see them, or a fake ruin, or according to Webster's, it's a building that's extravagant, useless, or fanciful, or doesn't really know what its purpose is. So I like this idea. I was also interested in contrasting these very high-end exclusive architect design homes that I would find pictures of in architecture books, and then combine it with something that was extremely mass market. It's called Float. Another really important influence on my work, and really in my life, is that my mother is an immigrant from New Zealand, and she lived in the US for about 40 years before she moved back there about 5 years ago. And so my whole life has been infused with this sense of longing for people and places that are really far away. And my work, especially the collages, has been, I think, an attempt to reconcile wanting to be in two places at once and having these two homelands or two places that mean very much to me, and to make a cohesive whole out of all these moving parts. This is called Tall Grass. So the picture inside that shape is one that I took. That's my mom standing in a field of grass in Kansas. So I hit on this format and was able to really work on this project a lot during the last year. So also in the last year, I began to pay a lot more attention to images like this that are from the Manufacturing Home series. They're pictures that are flatter, simpler shots of just materials, images that move towards abstraction, images that did an interesting 2D, 3D flip-flop. So what happens if I turn it sideways? I just wanted to try all these different things. What happens if I cut out all the interesting bits of the carpet from my, my reject prints and my work prints? And literally, I would do this with scissors and X-Acto blades. This is not done in Photoshop or on the computer. I was interested in how I could take these really familiar materials and talk about this idea of domestic disorientation, kind of from a new angle. And also I'm interested in this idea that built space is not necessarily reliable. This is as yet untitled, although I think of this as an image of the elephant in the room, the thing that's not discussed, kind of a floating sense of dread. And again, here you can you can see how the floor and the ceiling line, they're tipping, and it's a subtle visual way to throw you off balance. And that's the way the room really felt, actually. This one's called Heart with Four Chambers. Architectural space is really supposed to be rational. The lines are supposed to be straight, and it's not supposed to be all bendy and funhouse and make you feel off kilter. My clients hire me to shoot architecture. They don't want it to look like a funhouse. And so, but I'm also interested in how the spaces we live in can be emotional spaces as well. So this is kind of a way of me getting at that feeling of off-kilterness. And then at a certain point, I left the confines of the picture frame altogether with these fragments. And what I like about working in collage with photographs in particular is that they, these elements and these fragments really retain information about where they came from. You know that this is carpet, it's tipped on its side, but there's something disorienting enough about it. Your sense of gravity and your sense of stability hopefully are a little bit challenged. And also as I was making these, I started thinking about sculpture. Like these could be sketches for sculptures. So maybe down the road, when I find a friend with a wood shop, I can start building some of these in 3 dimensions. This piece is called Rogue Wave. I also started combining pictures from manufacturing home, all these sort of domestic material pictures, with just other images from my massive collection of snapshots. And I wanted to try to get out from under this specifically domestic subject matter. I was at a photo festival somewhere, and someone came up to me and said, "Oh, I know your work. You're the mobile home lady." And I thought, oh God, no, I'm not. Like, I didn't want to, just wanted to kind of be done with that aspect of my work. So I wanted to try to transform these elements and see what else they could be and what other possibilities there were, especially when something is taken out of its normal orientation. So this piece in the show, if you haven't been over to Midway, is about, I made the original collage, is about 5 inches across, but the piece in the show is about 5 feet. So I tracked down the individual elements of the negatives, scanned them, blew them up big. So I really wanted to feel like something that could wash over you, this sort of massive, imposing bedspread. And I also just worked with ordinary snapshots. I would just find some sort of interesting shape within the image, remove part of it, add something, take something else away. And I wanted to tweak this assumption that what you're looking at can be trusted, because that's a big assumption with photography, even still, I think. Sometimes my interventions were abrupt, and sometimes they were really subtle. Like the butterfly is not, that was actually in the picture. That's not what I added or took away. I like forcing the viewer to be aware of the artifice and also believing fully in it at the same time. When I look at artwork, I like to be aware that this is something that someone made, but wow, it's believable, and I trust it completely. This is called Forecast. I work on a lot of things all at once. when I run into a roadblock in one sort of series of collages, I'll switch gears and I've got something else to work on. So my studio and desk was sort of this crazy array of things going on all at once. It's from a series called Kansas. I shot the square pictures about 15 years ago when my mom lived in Kansas, and the cheap little mini lab prints aged really beautifully, and so I thought this would be a great little series. And I had been thinking about how my mom, who lived in Kansas for a long time, she'd finally moved back to New Zealand. And then a couple of years later, I moved back to the Midwest where I'd lived as a child. And so we did this little trading places thing. And so the images of the landscape and images of sky have been creeping into my work most recently. And from my discussions with people, it seems like what's important to me is trying to communicate the sense of how do you maintain a connection over a distance. And the sky seems to be an image and a metaphor that works for that in a great way. So this is my last picture. Thank you. The end.
Thank you, Amy. I think what's interesting is seeing through the fellowship is this ability to, and that artists take it, this ability to experiment and do something different during that period, not feeling that you have to follow exactly what you maybe thought you were going to do, but to have that opportunity to experiment. And I think Amy really did that. And I think also, too, with all the photographers, it's interesting to see kind of this wide breadth of what is happening in contemporary photography right now and how I think it's changed quite a bit over the last few decades. And there's really a lot of things from collage to book projects to social practice projects that are being involved. And I think what's nice is seeing within this group of McKnight Fellows is seeing that full range kind of displayed. On to the next. I'm supposed to throw Karl off, so so did that throw you off? Okay, good. So Karl Raschke, and I think what's interesting about Karl's project, if you've gone over and looked at it, it's like one where you actually are encouraged to come and touch the art and resequence the artwork. So if you haven't been over to Midway, you've got to come and see Karl's photographs and have your opportunity to actually touch them. Karl Raschke is a Minneapolis-based photographer. He received his MFA from the University of Minnesota in 1999. Since 2003, Raschke has been part of the crew behind Creative Electric Studios, a Northeast Minneapolis art and performance space. He is currently working on producing a movie about his father, the professional wrestler Baron von Raschke. Welcome, Karl Raschke.
Thanks. Hey, there he is. As Scott mentioned, I'm making this movie, and receiving the McKnight. Before I begin, thank you, Scott. Thank you, Jara, wherever you are. The McKnight experience was nothing but wonderful, and so I want to make sure. Thank you. Anyway, so I'm making this movie about my dad, and the McKnight Fellowship sort of coincided with the beginnings of that project, and the sort of my pitch for the McKnight to the McKnight folk, McKnight panel, centered around these books. My dad kept his date book. It was a fixture in our house, and it was by the phone. If the phone rang, be quiet. He's talking business. That was the only time I ever think I saw him angry, is if we made noise while he was talking on the phone. Anyway, so these inspired me to sort of start thinking about I had this record, this stack of date books that began in 1967 when he started wrestling, and went through to his retirement and beyond even, actually. And so it made me kind of reacquainted me with sort of this lifetime of surrounded by professional wrestling, this odd world of professional wrestling. And the movie is kind of has done a similar thing. I see the two projects as kind of mirror images. The movie is kind of the public face and sort of presenting this era of professional wrestling that sort of was a unique moment in time. And my photographic work is kind of my recollections and my impressions sort of through images about what it meant to grow up around this thing that I was sort of a part of, but not really a part of, and just a close observer of it in some way. So I'm going to talk. There's a lot of wrestling in this presentation. There's some wrestling in the show, in the art show. There's a lot of me in these pictures, and I'm going to talk about a couple things related to my photographs. One, or a couple. Well, I see images, or I make photographs in response to what I think of as a kind of bank of images in my head, things that have made an impression on me. And I see myself sort of attracted to certain subject matter or just noticing certain things based on this image bank. And a couple of contributors to that image bank, heavy contributors from a young age, were wrestling magazines, which I didn't read. I flipped through them to sort of see if my dad was in it, and I saw some very strange things. And you'll see some too. I have some examples. And the other thing is records, right? I grew up collecting records, sort of obsessed with records when I hit my punk rock teenage years, and music. And so the record store was kind of my art gallery. I came to the Walker. I was interested in visual arts as well, but a record store had a specific kind of impact. And you'll see one example of that as well. So I make these images, and they're in response to these things that are in my head. A couple things that attract me to photography as a sort of an art form, and the thing that pulls me back into making pictures no matter what, whether there's a purpose or not, whether I have a fellowship or not. One is this just kind of the nature of the photograph, right? I was thinking about it, preparing for this talk. Writers are told, fiction writers, right? They tell them show, don't tell. And the fact that a photograph, by its very nature, does that, it shows you everything, but it doesn't tell you anything, right? The photograph sort of stands mute, and it says, here it is, what do you make of it? It doesn't spoon feed you its meaning, right? The meaning accrues in whatever way it happens. And I like that openness, and one of my goals in this talk is to sort of keep my pictures open. So I'm not going to tell you some sort of definitive way to look at the pictures and judge them or whatever. The other thing is their autobiographic qualities, right? You look at a photograph and you immediately know something about the person who took it, whether it's just the way where they were, right? What some sort of situation they were in, some person they confronted, right? You know something, small thing about their life. So if you if you have a giant stack of photographs that someone took, you know a lot about them, right? Again, what it means, I don't know if you know anything about what it means, right? Because these photos stand mute. But that there's something about that really attracts me. And the third thing, which I sort of refer to, is this fact that you can shift the context of a photograph and it means very different things, right? This is this image as it appears in my exhibition over at Midway. You can go and pick it up and rip it or do whatever you want there at Midway. Don't rip it, but you can engage with it and sort of shuffle it around if you want. Here's the sort of a fragment of where it originally sort of made its public presence felt. This was the January 2011 issue of Wrestler magazine, 2 magazines in one. It's also Inside Wrestling if you flip it over, which I thought was nice and exciting. Anyway, so they ran this long interview of my dad, and, you know, he's a legend of professional wrestling. He's been a legend for 25 years. So at some point, you'd think that he would, I don't know, maybe he'll graduate to mythic. I don't know. Anyway, so they needed a photo for this thing. I sent them that photo. They were very happy. And I was happy to find myself in a wrestling magazine, my photograph in a wrestling magazine, which, like I said, contributed a lot to my this image bank. And here, the next slide is an example of one of the pictures that made quite an impression on me as a youth. This is my dad with a good friend of his and his one-time manager, Bobby Heenan. Some of you may know these names and may sort of be familiar with this wrestling era. It was a very particular time and place, and, you know, if you want to learn more about the specifics of that, you can see the movie that I'm making. Anyway, so this magazine, or this image existed in magazines that we had in our house, and for obvious reasons, it made quite an impression on me. When I first saw it, my dad made the point of telling me that that's not actually his blood. It's Bobby Heenan's blood, and he just for the photo, he took a little off and smeared it on himself. His desire to maximize the photo op worked, right? It appeared often in these wrestling magazines because of its sort of intense nature. Anyway, and this image is among many that sort of first, I think, started me thinking about photographs in a conceptual or theoretical way, like what the, because it did not comport with the way I saw this person, right? This, or the world, really, right? He, you know, it's sort of the polar opposite of the person I knew. And I'm getting emotional because I'm talking about my dad, but this was like, I love this picture, so don't get the wrong impression or something. Anyway, so this picture, like, it's just a really good example of that thing of like, okay, this picture is a fiction, right? It's a photograph, it's real. It's like, that's not my dad, but there's my dad, right? And so it opens up this crack of like, what's a photograph, and can I trust it, and what does it mean? And those wrestling magazines in general sort of open up that crack because in this era especially, they were basically like, there'd be an interview with my dad, and my dad never talked to the guy, so he was making up quotes that my dad said, and anyway, so it was like this just metafiction kind of thing going crazy. So, and this picture sort of, this picture never disturbed me, but it, like I said, it made an impression. It made that, it brought to mind another picture that I encountered, and I was talking about records and how they added to this image bank of mine. And this is a record that I saw very often when I was growing up, when I started going to First Avenue and 7th Street Entry for all ages shows. Like, they would have these matinees, and I would go there with my friends, and we'd stop at Northern Lights Music, which was on the corner, and sort of browse the record shelves. And this was in the local record bin, and it's, you know, I mean, it's this insane picture that is so intense. And each time I would go there, I would sort of seek it out and just try to make sense of it, like the intensity of it, the what's going on, you know, like how do you sort of, the mystery sort of was too enticing not to know, you know, and because it's on a record cover, there's no context beyond like, okay, they're trying to make some sort of statement about the music inside. I was scared. I wanted to buy the record, but I didn't want to hear what was on it, right? Because it was like, if this is the cover, what's on it? You know, what does the music sound like? And sort of fast forward 10 or 12 years, I'm not sure what it is, and my sister ended up marrying the guitarist of North Equator 9, which sort of made a weird sort of full circle thing, and I met Pat, the photographer, who made this picture, and the drummer of the band is actually here tonight. And I heard the story, and it's taken in India. And this guy, you can see a rock down there at the bottom. He sort of was bashing himself in the head and then asking people for money in sort of a religious as a part of a religious rite or something. But the stark sort of power of that image sticks with me, right? Moving on. This is an image of the fake Mad Dog, and this time the blood is fake, right? And this was taken on the set of the movie that I'm making. And so here's this image, right? That's in my image bank, and me sort of bringing it back up and taking another angle, looking at it, trying to make sense of it. And so this is in sort of a setup situation, right? We got the fake blood, we got all that going on. But even in more mundane settings, these pictures kind of come back to me and sort of make, inform what I photograph and how I go about making photographs. Here again, this time the blood is fake and it's beet juice. But it seems, on that visceral level, your first look, something seems wrong, or right, depending on your perspective, I guess. Here, and then back to wrestling, out of the wrestling magazine world and into the real world. Here's the real Mad Dog Vachon in his real garage playing a little cribbage with my dad, and sort of bringing back this, bringing this story back around and kind of allowing me to re-examine or rethink about or try to understand in a new way this wrestling world, this weird place that I grew up in. Mental place, right? This theoretical place. All right, back into the magazine world. Wrestling magazine. This is 1971, 2, somewhere in there in Indiana, I think. And a couple years after I was born, my dad wrestled a bear. On a photographic level, I love this picture just because they really drew in his eyes there to emphasize that he's like staring down that bear, like they're jet black. I don't know if you can tell from here, but anyway, I love this picture. It's very strange. But that resonates with me on many levels because my dad, I grew up hearing stories of him bringing home stray animals and, birds with broken wings and nursing them back to health. He brought home a skunk when he was 9 and, that had a broken leg and that caused all sorts of trouble. So he's this sort of animal lover, caring guy. And so, again, this sort of jarring, strange disconnection. Later in his life, he took a job, later after he retired, basically had retired from professional wrestling. He had a job at the Minnesota Zoo, driving the monorail and giving the interpretive talks, telling you about the animals on your right, on your left. And so going to the zoo for me is like this strange experience of sort of thinking about wrestling in this context. And also it's just strange. This is in the Milwaukee Zoo, a big wrestling town. And that gorilla had a broken finger that always stuck up, so it seemed worth photographing. And so everywhere I look, I see wrestling, and it sort of like envelops my world. A simple sort of family moment becomes an eye gouge, right? And here's another, here's a moment this is after my dad's retired. He does these autograph signings. And, much like I'm presenting this to you, and some of you may have a familiarity with him or with that era of wrestling. Many people, it's been so many years, just have no clue, and it's this thing that maybe their uncle talked about, I get blank stares. And this sort of is an interesting image of that, like, why is my mom looking at this guy that way? kind of image, like, and, you know, it's amazing what people get sentimental about, you know, when you consider that, I think the third image I showed you, right? But they do. And so this project, like, if you look at the box of pictures, if you go to the Midway and look at the box of pictures, you're going to see all sorts of images. And in my head, they all relate to professional wrestling. For you, they probably won't. And I don't think they should, right? They'll relate to your particular experience of life or whatever. But you can probably relate to the father thing, right? Anyway, and so that's this sort of blanket, and that's what I was exploring. You know, this weird world of wrestling that blanketed my life was exploring in this work. And this is the sort of the end. This is my. Sorry. So this is my son, and this is sort of the new kind of image bank that I'm building. Yeah, it's talking. Sorry, I need a moment. I'm talking about my dad. That always gets me. So, yeah, building a new image bank, seeing the world through a different set of eyes, exposure to all sorts of ways of experiencing the world in a new. All right, so that's all I have to say about these pictures. And I have one more thing to show you, and that is a short 1 minute long trailer that will give you an impression of sort of what this movie is going to be like. It's, yeah, so have at it. And let me know what you think.
All-Star Wrestling. All-Star Wrestling.
Baron von Raschke, the Clawmaster, has been in professional wrestling for over 20 years.
Raschke lining right up for the claw,
Baron von Raschke. The Baron gets scorched or coconut with that hand.
He's hit the concrete floor. He's hurt.
It turns out I was doing a great job of selling it. And he had bought it all the way. In the words of my good friend, the Mad Dog, 90% of what we do is the interview. Only 10% is the wrestling.
Accepting the body of the slaw, Baron von Raschke, soon to be on the scene.
From Algeria, the World Heavyweight Wrestling Champion, Mad Dog Raschke.
The claw was and that is all the people need to know.
Thank you, Karl. And if you would like to hear more from Karl and the Baron, you should come back on August 4th. They're going to be actually doing a talk out on the open field on fame, family, and mayhem. And that's at 6 p.m. It's in your program. So if you want more, there's your chance. Our next artist is Monica Haller. She works in long-term collaborations with individuals and groups of people. Using photography, video, and writing, her roles as an artist change with each collaboration. Monica's art practice is rooted in social justice concerns and attempt to mobilize information by amplifying the materials and technologies that her collaborators turn to along the way. Her work is currently supported by the Guggenheim Foundation and the National Endowment for the Arts. Please welcome Monica Haller.
Thanks for your help, everyone, for passing out these books. What people are passing around are books from the project I'm going to talk about tonight. It's called the Veterans Book Project. And I'll just talk about it a little bit. It was just beginning when when the McKnight Fellowship happened. And so that was in 2009, which means that Scott and Jera have been kind of sticking with me and being part of this since then. So thank you very much, and to the McKnight Foundation. So these books are a growing library. This project is a growing library of books. And each one is authored by an individual soldier, family member, Iraqi, people who've been fighting in and experiencing the current U.S. wars. And so they're meant to be read one-on-one in your lap and one-on-one. And so please pass them around, share with each other while I'm talking. Each book is individual. Like I said, this book is by a author who was a nurse in Iraq in an operating room. And this book is by a soldier who never fired a shot, but at times really wanted to. This book is by a man whose brother was killed in Afghanistan from an IED. Another book is floating around, is by an Iraqi woman who lost both of her legs to a U.S. errant missile when it landed on her bed and didn't detonate, or there wouldn't be anything to talk about from her. This book is called Riley and His Story, and it's the prototype for this project. It's a book that I did with one man, Riley Charbonneau, and his images from Abu Ghraib prison, where he was a nurse, where he was a combat nurse. And I could talk about that book for a while and what it came out of, but to just give a little inkling, he had all types of photographs, many that he didn't have any memory of making, nor did he remember the events themselves. And so I was thinking a lot about how he was using the camera in combat and what I might learn from that. Also, how these photos could function for him at home and how they could function for me and for the rest of us. For taking that one example, if he had all these pictures that he didn't have any memory of making and didn't remember the events themselves, then it was as if he was looking at them for the first time at home, and I was looking at them alongside him for the first time. And so how did that change my role or implicate me in some way as a witness? And so that was just one of the questions I was exploring in this book. So with the time that I have here, I'd like to tell you a little bit about how these books are made and why. The books are made in 10-day to 2-week very immersive workshops that have so far taken place around the United States. This one is in San Jose, California, and was part of the San Jose Biennial that Steve Dietz curated. This workshop was in Portland at Portland State's Art and Social Practice program. And at the workshop, there are about 5 bookmakers or participants who come. And together, we organize their materials, generate writing. They already have writing. We do that together. Those materials can be emails, journal entries, lots and lots of photos, both digital and prints. At each workshop, there are usually a whole host of volunteers and people I've brought with me, other artists and writers who work with the bookmakers. Their materials are embedded into software that I built with others, bookmaking software that's really meant to be both the sort of stable, conceptually and kind of practically the stable site for these massive amounts and sometimes elusive materials. This is a picture of Joe making his book with faith. So as I said, that people generate writing, they gather writing. Oftentimes I will actually transcribe as someone talks to me and do a lot of editing. And in that last picture, Faith was starting to do some of the same. This is one Ted's book, and this is Patricia Briggs, who is part of the community here, who's come with me to a couple workshops to take part in working as kind of an editor and writing volunteer. The books, the way they come together really varies tremendously from author to author. They always start with pretty long conversation or really just listening as they talk about what materials are important to them and why. Often that becomes clear as they just start pulling things out and seeing what they have. This is Jesse Albrecht, who really, Jesse, as he started going through his photos, started to see that he really felt like he drug his family to war with him and was responsible for that, and found all these postcards that he didn't remember that they had given him along the way. So Jesse, early in his book, wrote, "My parents did everything they could to keep me from joining the military. My mom kicked the military recruiter out of the house the summer before my senior year. When I told them I was going to enlist in the National Guard after my freshman year of college, they offered to match any fiscal benefit the military had to offer. I joined anyway, and they supported me. Revisiting the pictures, cards, and memories makes me realize that I brought my family to war through me, and I'm responsible for that." So this became clear, as I said, as we pulled out all of his materials, and so then we and he decided to design his book with that in mind. So in the middle of his tour, when he's like jacked up, as he would call it, on fear and testosterone and adrenaline, his dad sent him a postcard. And it says, "Dear Jesse, remember the summer when we picked the fawns up along one of our woods roads? Love, Dad." And then it goes back to combat. And so his postcards are really kind of the chapter dividers, or the sections where his family keeps coming in. All the books are printed using Lulu, which is print-on-demand technology, and they're sold at printing costs. So each book, the price of each book varies because the books have different page numbers, as you can see. Some of them are 50, some of them are 300. This is Nate Lewis's book, and his is 126 pages, so it's $30. There are lots of reasons for the printed book for me, and there are lots of reasons for using print-on-demand technology. I'll start here, and I'd, of course, love to keep talking about them. Authors can order their books as many as they want. They can do different things with them. There are lots of reasons why just print-on-demand works conceptually here. Some authors have ordered like 50 at a time and send them out, or another author is ordering a whole bunch and using his as a fundraiser for his VFW. But also the books are printed because then I can give it to someone, they can give it to someone. The book can be right in your lap, right in my lap, one-on-one, which to me was quite opposite of the way that I was hearing about the wars at the time when I started the project. For me, the books were a very tangible site for materials that I was learning were often very elusive, and definitely lots and lots of them. So the linear qualities of the book to me kind of contrasted or offered a sort of logic for these like massive amounts and chaotic kind of materials. They're also, very importantly, tactile and mobile in a very tangible way, and so they're meant to be given out and deployed, and like I said, in this mobile way. Each book is first deployed, because they're objects for deployment, first deployed by the author. And they are the one who determines their their audience, their first audience. They're the experts in this. Often the audiences are their family members, friends. That's often the case. This is Juliet's book, and she says right here, this book is for my husband and my children. Oftentimes, through seeing the first audience, we were also able to see who else is affected or even implicated by the wars. Another woman writes her book for a U.S. audience, and she's Iraqi. Another man is writing a book about the Iraqi refugee crisis, and his book, his first audience is Congress, and we're making a very, very inexpensive book to print so that it can be sold, or not sold, bought. People can buy it, and they can actually mail it if they want, like one might mail a postcard. So the design is always very related to who they're making the books for. They're also called objects for deployment because they really are meant to be a beginning. The books are the first step. And I write about this right on the cover of this first book, the Riley book. And I still believe it. I say that artwork and artists are adaptable. You, the tactical reader, can use this object for your own device, or you can attend to another archive in need of careful attention. This is an object for deployment. And so in a way, I kind of accepted my own invitation, but I really mean it. And I see these next things, the way the authors are deploying the books, as part of the work. Lots of authors are doing their own lectures. One author, he collaborated with another artist and did an installation around his book. The book is down in the middle, you can see it, and there's the rest of the work around it. And that toured around Nebraska and Iowa. Someone else had his book reviewed on the public access, or had his book reviewed and then an interview on the public access show. Lots of authors are making their own business cards and passing them out and starting different kinds of conversations that way. One woman, not Marianne, but Pamela, she shares them with me. It's all the time. Shares with me the kind of experiences she has, and I love it. She's passed her card out to the security guard at the VA, for example, there's a big glass window at their VA and a gate, and she kind of slid her card under the window and said, "Do you want to know what brings me here every week?" And the security guard said, "Yeah." And so they actually got together, and she read her book, and they had a conversation about that. People's hairdressers, lots of people get their cards. This is a journal by someone who read a friend of one of the authors. She started her own journal in response to his book, and this is the first page of that. To me, these are kind of the next projects. Their projects. This is an exhibition concept that Phil Studer, one of the authors, is doing with IFP in Vance Gellert in Minneapolis. And he's actually the one, the library will be there, and he's the one that's really going to, along with Vance, curate the show. So this is his kind of concept of what that would look like. To me, one of the reasons for this is that it's really important for me to connect those who are fighting and directly experiencing the wars with those who are not in the United States, including myself. And that's been a motivating factor from the very beginning of this back in 2005 when I contacted Riley and really felt like I needed to place myself in closer proximity, if I could, to the wars. Also, I believe the authors can be experts and are experts of these wars just as much, if not more, than any media or political figure. They can, in the project they do, speak philosophically and authoritatively and self-reflectively, even if that's not necessarily their training. And that's what we're arguing here. To me, the role of the truth teller, or truth-telling as an activity, is important here. So right now, where I'm at is that this was very much at the beginning when the McKnight Fellowship started, and I'm now about 30 books into the library, several more are underway, and my intention has been to make about 50 of them. The number is right now is less important to me than the actual books that are in the library and the ones that I see right now that are really missing, to kind of deepen the critical nature of the library. And so that's what I'm focusing on. I'm giving myself a little more time to do that this year. Each workshop now in the future coming up here is also a training for other people, other organizations who are going to take this over to do that. And kind of the overall scope of this project is that is to create really a strong library foundation and workshop model that can be expanded and expandable, to really take into account and grow and adapt according to the changing military situation and the legacy of these wars. That's kind of the scope of the project. The other piece is that the books continue to be deployed by the authors, and then I will start, along with others, deploying the actual library that I imagine as and conceptualize and is meant to be installed as a reading room for beginners. And so far along the way, we've been doing some different experiments of that idea to prepare ourselves. So this is a reading room where that was also a reception. So the authors, family members and friends and everyone came and read, and then it stayed installed as a reading room. Again, kind of conceptualized to be this reading room. We've had some, this is at Colorado College in Colorado Springs, where there's a huge military population. Harold Fletcher, another artist, was there doing some work and invited me to come in and do the project there and then be part of this exhibition. So we played around with some different ways of showing work and showing the library there. I've done reading workshops, or tried experimenting with this idea of a reading workshop where people read quietly but together. And that has been a scary experiment in a way. I invite everyone to come and then sit together quietly, but it's been amazing, and the conversations that have come out of it have been very, very complex. So this is a reading workshop in Portland. There was another one at Cornell recently. Those are the experiments I've done so far with the reading room. That's where I'll end it, talking about the book project. Thank you.
We'll continue to cycle the books, so just at the end of the talk this evening, kind of appreciate if you kind of collect those with the ushers. Thank you, Monica. Our final artist tonight is Carrie Thompson. Carrie Thompson's work has explored her relationship with her family, roots, rootlessness, and restlessness. Her most recent photos document a trip to Japan that preceded the birth of her first child, Goma. And what began as a search for the subject became instead a search of ongoing interrogations. Please welcome Carrie Thompson.
All right, so when I first got the McKnight, I was actually just finishing a project about my grandparents, and I was kind of in a spot where I was, lost and wondering what I was going to do with my next project, which most artists have. And so a friend of mine and his wife invited me and my boyfriend to Japan, and I was like, this is a great idea. She's going to figure out if she wants to live in Japan, and he's going to figure out if he would like to live there too, and I'm going to follow them around in their search for home, and I'm going to photograph their search for home. And we planned this bike trip, and it's going to be a month long, and then they got divorced right before we left, so I was kind of lost, and I have to go on this trip. I mean, it's planned, it's 2 weeks away. So I just decided I'm going to search for my own subject, a new subject, and something that's not just a girl who's in Japan for the first time taking pictures. So this is every day me and my boyfriend ride our bikes 40, 50 miles, and I'm lost and confused, and just, the first thing that came to me was water and like how it can connect. It's an island, and I can connect these images by finding fishermen and other people that are, involved with the water, around the water, and for some reason that seemed right. So for, the whole month, I figured this is going to be perfect. I'm going to take pictures of water, and it's going to be a really wonderful project. And so there are a lot of pictures in this first section of me like searching and trying to figure out what I'm doing with this water idea. And it's just me looking, and this is me looking. And I decided I'm going to try to tie different things together, like birds, and my last project had a lot of birds, and I'm thinking about all these different things that are going to make this project perfect, and just about Japan. And I'm really interested in telling stories through images because I'm really bad at writing stories, so I'm trying to, build this story kind of on the spot. And so this is the fish market. I had to go and went, and it was closed, so I went back again a different day, and I found this fish tail, and I thought it was really great. It was kind of a perfect metaphor for what I was going through, being lost. And fishermen are everywhere in Japan, and they're so interesting, and they're really, they're really great, and they hate me. I asked many of them, can I take your picture? And they would just give me what I call the big X, and they just say no. And so all the fishermen are from very far away. And because in the middle of the story, or the middle of the time, I was like, I'm going to do this project about fishermen. They're going to be, it's going to make total sense. So the image that I'm going to show you are all, it's 3 sections. The first section is this searching. And it doesn't exactly, it's just me looking and trying to find out what I'm doing. And then this amazing thing happens. I'm sleeping on the beach, and I wake up, and this man here in the picture, he comes up to me, and he's like, you have to move, my rabbit's coming. And he speaks English, which is like 12 days into the trip, and someone's speaking English to me, and I was really excited about that and very confused about him and his rabbit. And we were sleeping right next to where this picture was taken. And his rabbit's name is Goma, and I guess every day he goes to the beach and he photographs Goma. And Goma's just this wild rabbit who likes to be fed and photographed, and I was instantly jealous that this man could wake up every morning at 5 a.m. and just walk to the beach, and he has his subject, and it's perfect, and all of these people, it's on the boardwalk, and all these people just come, and they love Goma, and they feed Goma. And this is a fisherman who comes, and he had some cabbage, and he was feeding Goma, and instantly jealous. And at this point, I decide that when I get back home, I need to find my personal Goma. I was like, I must find my Goma. And all the pictures before were then kind of nothing to me. I was like, this is great. I just spent a month in Japan. I have all these pictures of water, and it's nothing to do with, my Goma. This is a picture he took of me and Anthony and Goma, the bunny. So I stayed in contact with, I'm not going to pronounce his name, I'm going to botch it, but with the man who is the father of Goma, the rabbit father. And Goma had babies, so I found out Goma's a girl, and then I find out that 2 weeks later that I'm pregnant. So I'm like, this is a perfect connection. He has the rabbit has babies, and now I'm pregnant, so I'm going to now take pictures of my world as a newly pregnant person, kind of creating and growing my own Goma. So these are from various, not in order, but various times of my pregnancy and what I started doing when I thought was important, because I really never thought I was going to have a baby or you know, really didn't think I would have a baby. To work through it, I decided to write him letters, and these are the letters. I think there's 6 or 7 of them. And I was just looking at things that, you know, remind me of childhood, remind me of what, or like make me think of what it could possibly be like to have a child. And then throughout this is these letters to my son. And there's small like rabbit things that show up too because of the bunny, but like chaos of just having a child is like this picture like seemed so perfect to me. Even though I had no idea what it was like to have a child, I just thought like that's what it's like. This is a very important rabbit in my life. Is my mother's antique rabbit, and since it was a rabbit story, I thought it was important for the project. So this story, my mom told me, and it's a story that was kind of shocking to me, but they used to shoot like the urine of a woman into a rabbit, and if the rabbit died, it meant the woman was pregnant. Which for my story and for the situation, it was just so weird. I don't know how, if like the hormones of a pregnant woman was supposed to like throw off the rabbit and the rabbit would die. It's not true. That's my pre-child family. I went on a walk with this turkey, and I kind of thought of him as I knew I was having a boy, I think, at that time, but I'm not sure. But I kind of thought of him as my son, and we walked around. So as you can probably tell, I named my son Goma after the rabbit. It just felt perfect to me. I mean, it's kind of a weird name for a boy or a child because it means sesame. It's the color of the rabbit. So recently I was at a friend's house who is Japanese, and her mother met him, and she's only speaks Japanese pretty much, and we thought they thought I named him Sesame, and that I was trying to be interesting talking in her language by saying Goma. And we said, no, his name is actually Goma, and I've never seen anyone so shocked in my life. She was like, oh my God, you named him Goma? I felt weird. So this picture, this is the images I'm showing you are actually the order of my book, and this is typhoon in Japan. So I switched back to Japan for one image, and then it's my son, Goma, who's somewhere. He was going to show up here, but I think he's crying somewhere. So yeah, that's all.
Well, I'd like to invite all of our artists up to the panel. And while you're doing that, what's interesting is I think our Carrie and my wife and I had a son, I think within like a week or 2 weeks of yours, and it's been very interesting. I don't know what parents did without the internet. It's like the greatest thing ever. Like something's wrong, or like they're either doing something or not doing something, and the internet. But it's been very interesting on like Facebook having like exchanges about children with Carrie and other people too, back and forth about what they're doing or not doing. We're going to take a few questions from the audience, and the ushers will come down with mics here. Please wait for a microphone if you have a question, because we are recording this. We'd like to get that very nice and clear. So if does anybody have any questions for our artists? Dead silence. Stop the calling people. There we go.
I have a. Are we on? Okay. Monica, this is a question for you, and it's about your use of the word deployment, and that's a word that you rarely hear in civilian circles, and in military families, it's generally not good news when your soldier is being deployed. And it seems an important word to you. You use it many times regarding the books, and I just wonder if you have any thoughts about the good and the bad of it.
I did use a lot tonight, didn't I? This is on, right? Yeah, I mean, I think I explained a little bit why I use it as an idea of something that's there and standing reserve and being ordered forth by the author, and in a way, it's, I think of myself, and I think some of the authors are taking it back in a way. They are the ones doing the deploying in this particular case. And I mean, I really debated for a while if I wanted to use that word for some of those reasons. Because of the way it's loaded, because of the way it's loaded for families in particular. And I talked to the authors about that a lot when I was deciding if I wanted to do it, some of them at least that were around at the time. And I was surprised at how, in a way, at how supportive they were or excited about that, the use of the word. And I think, and I won't speak for them, but I speculate and really related to taking it over in providing kind of hijacking it in a way. Giving it a new meaning.
Change, you came in with some of you have mentioned that even last week, where you had a project idea and then in the middle or at the early stage you discovered, it just kind of changed, or you were forced to change. How did that feel? Is that a frightening feeling, or, what happened? I mean, how do you explain that to people?
Good question. It's a little scary when you have to re-examine what you're doing and leave something behind that you cared very deeply about for a long time, and like how Carrie talked about, all the work up to this point meant nothing. And in my experience, I was quite happy to leave the subject matter. I don't know if anyone else wants to answer that, but.
My situation was just I had to. I mean, I wasn't gonna not go on my trip, and it was scary just because I had researched all these places that I was going to go and all these photographs I was going to take with this couple, specific to them, and that was gone. But it's kind of nice because then you just start new and you have to figure it out, and you're searching, and things that you're searching for kind of go from one thing to the other. And for me, it was kind of like Japan to this Goma bunny, and then to my child, and it kind of tells a story. And what I'm interested in is telling stories. So you have to kind of be fluid about those things. So, but it's really scary to go to another country with no idea what you're doing. Yeah.
Karl, I feel weird asking you a question when I could just ask you a question sometime. But the books that you found, that you went through of your dad's, and I found those photographs in your exhibition probably the most fascinating because you know my own thing and going through things. And I wonder, are photographs what your son Roman will have? What are your artifacts?
You mean like, yeah, well, and I mean, see, you're gonna get me all emotional again. Anyway, I'm just like my dad in that way. He cries at the drop of a hat. Yeah, I mean, part of this project is sort of me trying to make sense of this thing that was such a part of my life, and in a way, it is looking to him and saying like, okay, how am I gonna explain this, and tell him about this very sort of central aspect of our life that is fading. And it's interesting because talking about this stuff, it's like I think about my photographs in a million different ways, and I'm really foregrounding the wrestling thing right now. But it's I lost my train of thought. Where'd it go? Where'd it go? Come back. I had somewhere. Yeah, it's gone. I don't know why. Sorry. Okay. Yeah, next. I'll get back to you. Just give me a second.
Karl?
Go ahead.
I was wondering, you talked about how your photography was driven by this image bank in your head. And I was wondering if that same process applies to the movie that you're making, and if so, is there any tension between that and trying to tell the story of a real-life person, your father?
Well, the process of making the movie is very interesting because it's much more collaborative, right? I'm not the director. The director of the movie is here, but I'm very involved in the process, right? So I don't see that as my vision. That's more of like this sort of group vision and about a popular subject, and so it's sort of my dad as this legend, and examining him in that sort of light. And the photographs are get at that subject matter from a very different direction, much more personal and much more sort of homey. There's nothing homey about our movie. It's very, over the top and crazy, as maybe the trailer showed.
I think that's time for one more question. Or maybe we're done. Thank you, everybody, for coming out tonight, and thank you to all of our panelists and fellows for not only tonight, but the whole year that's been working with you, or 2 years in some cases. It's been great. So please, there's music, and the bar's open outside, so stick around, and the galleries are open for a little while yet as well. So thanks for coming out tonight, and We're done.